Oh, hello, good people of the world. Welcome into another episode of Behind the Glass Sports. I'm Aiden Dowens, joined by Will Miller, Hardy Graham. Quite a few things have happened since we were last with you. Tonight, we get to talk about some basketball. We get to look forward to probably some of the best basketball of the regular season throughout the entire NCAA. We get to talk about the Super Bowl. Um, that's pretty much it because we're going to run out of time. So, I mean, that's what we've got for you. That's it right there. Gentlemen, how are we doing this evening?
Doing great. First parade of the Mardi Gras season here in Mobile is Friday night. Uh, Dealing with some really rough weather at this moment in time, though. It's things are going to get really nasty later tonight, right when I get to go into work. So I'm very excited for that. But
Nice.
overall, just happy that we've made it to the point in this college basketball season that we've talked about for the past couple of months leading up to it, and I think it's going to be more exciting than we probably even thought it would be.
I'm looking forward to this basketball game. I mean, we talked a lot about how unthinkable it was, but now it's real. Now it's here. There will be so many people that paid such a too high price to get in, which is really one of the great ingenuities of the American experience. So let's
Yes.
all enjoy that. And I think that the biggest thing that goes into that is just where these programs were. I mean, it used to be a foreign concept to even think about both of them being ranked at the same time playing each other, and now it's number one versus number two. Game of the century in basketball. Never happened in the football game. May never again if the Auburn coaching cycle continues to give the gifts that it is so known for over the past 2 decades and change. So we shall see.
Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah.
at StubHub right now. The get-in price is 327. There's not too many around that price point. It very quickly jumps up into the 800 to a couple $1,000 range. So, if you got more money in your back pocket than I do, then more power to you. Be one of the 15,000 in there, letting your voice to the tide on Saturday afternoon. But I don't know that it. I don't think any of us could have conceived. You're right, Will. Um, of it being at this point, we knew, based on the last handful of years, that both of these teams were going to be really good. They've had staying power throughout the regular season, even when dealing with injuries. It's been really refreshing. As you mentioned, football has not delivered on the rivalry for quite some time. So it is nice that there is another sport that's able to do that for us, um, and bring out some proper hatred between these two fan bases, not just a bunch of eye rolling silliness on Twitter like we get during football season. So that's nice.
Yeah, both of these teams have sat here and just alternated between being like right near the top of the rankings in the past couple of seasons. Auburn was there right around there last year, Alabama 2 years ago, Auburn 3 years ago, Bama 4 years ago. It's both of these teams have been really, really good, across the board. But to finally get a season where it lines up perfectly, number one, number two teams in the entire country. It's the first number one, number two matchup, I believe. Um, in SEC basketball history. You
Mhm.
can fact check that for me if you want, but I believe that is the case. And for it to be between two you know well considered football schools has to be driving the Kentuckys and the Tennessees and the Arkansas who have a very lengthy history of basketball success. It's got to be driving those teams absolutely insane to think that college basketball at this moment in time runs through the Yellowhammer State. Not something when 5-6 years ago I really would have ever thought that to be the case. If you turn the clock back to the Avery Johnson days, I was like, "Yay, we won a game. Maybe next year we'll make it to the second weekend." Now we're thinking maybe this year we'll go to a national championship. Next year, try to do it again. And that's exactly how Auburn fans feel as well. Both of these teams last night avoided what were quite possibly some of the biggest bear trap game setups I've ever seen in my life. Uh, Crimson Tide got it done big. Auburn struggled a little bit, but pulled ahead down the stretch in that game and won fairly comfortably. Um, Will, do you think Alabama exhausted all of its shooting last night for Saturday? I mean, this team has shot better on the road than it has at home.
Well, that is one of the talking points. This team has definitely played better on the road as a whole, not even just from a shooting the ball standpoint, but just everything, every aspect has just clicked more, which has mystified a lot of people here on the home front. But I think part of it is just the getting up for certain games in such a way that isn't present at home for whatever reason. We've talked about the games that we've seen that rear its head in some fashion or another. But to I guess answer your main question, shooting mojo is one of those things that sometimes it carries over and sometimes it doesn't. This certainly isn't the same shooting team as it was last year, thanks to Latrell Wright still getting injured. And Mark Sears not putting up the numbers that he did, which part of that might just be because he doesn't have another guard like Wrightsell that can, shoot the absolute PISS out of the basketball like Chris
that
Youngblood.
kid
I don't
wearing
know,
number 2, Will. That kid wearing number 2.
Youngblood and Holloway are getting there, but
Yeah,
they've been coming off the bench, over the last month or so, and now lately they're only really starting to come into their own. So I think that it's possible that you see more of that compliment that you saw last year from those two guys as they get more minutes. But I don't know. I tend to be on the side of, it kind of just varies on what you get every game. So whether they exhausted it or not, I don't know. If you're Alabama, you certainly hope not. I think that the turnovers are still there, and that's the more pressing matter at hand because that was really bad last night once again. I don't know if we're just entering the territory like we are with the defense last year, where at some point in the calendar you just accept what it is and try to move forward in spite of it. And I fear that may be the case, but that's and you can't turn the ball over in games like Saturday and expect to win regardless of where it's played. But I do think that, they'd be well advised to score 103 points again, if at all possible.
Part of me wonders if the turnover thing is sort of a byproduct of the pace of play that Alabama goes with. They're moving with such intensity and ferocity and just pushing their bodies to the absolute max, which, I know we like to think that that's what athletes are doing on the field or the court at all times, but the reality of it is they aren't usually. Oftentimes, especially in a game like basketball, you're throttling at, 70, 80% speed, trying to be tactile and graceful in your movements of your body, very precise, more than just raw, fast, and powerful. Alabama goes raw, fast, and powerful. And so part of me wonders.
Context, pause.
Pause.
You ain't playing. But part of me wonders if the turnovers are just simply a byproduct of that. And if that's the case, then I have to say that I wouldn't trade the way they play offense to have less turnovers.
Yeah, they lead the entire country in scoring per game. Over 90 points a game. This was the 7th 100-point game, not just of Nate Oates' tenure as the University of Alabama basketball coach, but of this season. Something that is just absolutely ridiculous. And for a team that hasn't shot the ball as well as it did last year, to get to 7 100-point games is something that we can all look back on and say, wow, this team is dangerous if you let them get into any sort of rhythm. Auburn is one of those teams that can knock you off a rhythm, however. Their defense has been very good all season. They got a lot of length. They play two bigs a lot of the time with Janai Broome, Dylan Cardwell. Alabama, it's almost like they brought in guys like Cliff Amore to counter that kind of look that Auburn's going to be giving them this Saturday. Grant Nelson will probably play the 4. He'll probably be on Janai Broome, probably more than some Alabama fans would probably like him to be, but he's going to have to step up, and he's been winning the hard hat last night. He has stepped up and played very good defense at times. Obviously, he cannot sit there and be a drop big, number like the 5 guy on the team. But being the 4, going out there, guarding in space, doing all of those things well, and just playing with a lot of intensity, something that he brings to the table. Didn't even have to be a scoring threat last night in that 103-point outing against the Texas Longhorns at the Moody Center. This team, and we look at the turnovers. We know this team can play against really good competition and not turn the ball over. When they went up to West Lafayette and played Purdue, only 8 turnovers in that game. They can limit them when they need to. Of course, in that Purdue game, they didn't exactly shoot the ball as well as Nate Oates and every Alabama fan on the planet probably would have liked. But you can limit the turnovers. And I think it's going to be important very early on with the pace of how this game's going to go, two of the better offenses in the entire country. If Alabama wants to have a chance to win this game, biggest game of the season, arguably, one of the biggest games of the Nate Oates tenure. They're going to need to keep possession of the ball because you cannot allow this Auburn team to get out and run, something that they really like to do.
I'd like to say 2 things. First part, I watched the other night when I wasn't sleeping, one of my unhealthy life choices as of recent. I watched a couple of games of the run and gun Loyola Marymount offense of the 1989-90 season with Hank Gathers and Bo Kimball, and scored 121 points a game, and they didn't turn the ball over as much. You'd see them do it sometimes because, like Aiden said, it's a byproduct of the pace of play, but it wasn't as sloppy. It wasn't as careless. Part of it was just a different game back then, but it was very refined the way they did it. Yeah, they're going to run you up and down the court. I mean, if you're an opposing team, your entire practices that week are probably going to be suicides, and that's it. But it wasn't filled with as much of this errant passing, this careless giveaways, this backyard basketball-esque stuff. A visually pleasing system. And number 2, I remember being a junior in high school when Auburn came to Coleman Coliseum as the number 4 team, undefeated, 15-0. Alabama, as it was at the time, strongly mediocre, strongly underachieving, strongly making fans scratch their heads wondering what the next step was going to be. But that was the first time that I remember people, being jacked for a basketball game, walking around outside the arena before a basketball game, loudest I'd ever heard the place. It was one of the most fun times I've ever had at a basketball arena when Alabama beat the brakes off of them. But that was the first game that you wondered if they could do this time and time again, that, Alabama could potentially become a basketball school one day. And at that time, it was just one night. It was just, maybe a flash in the pan, but it was special. And, now fast forward to now, I don't think anybody in the arena that night imagined getting to this point. But, it's certainly a full circle moment.
Yeah. Both of these teams have been really, really good. Some of the games in Tuscaloosa have been more competitive as of late. Alabama, I believe, has only won one time at Neville Arena since 2016. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been a really tough place to play. If Alabama wants to get have a shot to win the SEC regular season title, be the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament, this is a game that I don't know if Auburn's necessarily even going to lose again. You have to win this game. It's a big game. Of course, you imagine, it's a 3 p.m. tip-off. Everyone, and their mother should be able to make that game. It's not like you have school the next day, anything like that. The only thing getting in the way is the ticket prices, as we kind of alluded to at the beginning of this show. But one thing that, it's kind of stood out to me last night and reminded me of the Final Four run last year is at some point, one guy is just going to have to be a spark and have a big game that no one really expects him to have a big game. You need guys to, of course, you need your star players to go out there, give their consistent,
Imagine if Aiden Holloway scores 30 points.
Yeah. I'm hoping he saves that game for the Auburn return trip because I think doing that after shooting as quote unquote poorly as he did last season in Neville Arena, if he came back to Neville Arena with a different uniform on and dropped 30 points on like 45% shooting from the outside.
There's going to be some Auburn Twitter accounts getting arrested for cyber threats.
Yeah, there would be some very dangerous things going on. But hey, people are going to step up. That's just the nature of the game. Some guys are going to have rough nights. Some guys are going to play well. Very curious to see, the battle between two guys that are projected to go in the first round, freshman guards, Todd Pettiford, LeBaron Philon. Philon was at one point committed to play at Auburn under Bruce Pearl. So,
I was told, Hardy, I heard that the Holloway Philon backcourt was going to feed families.
I was told that, and it's feeding families in Tuscaloosa. It's done some really, really great things. And Philon has struggled a little bit in conference play, hasn't quite been, as elite as a freshman that he was throughout, a large part of the non-conference play. But if last night is a sign of things to come and LeBaron Philon is back to, being a lottery pick-esque type of point guard in this league, this team's going to be really dangerous, and it's going to be really fun to watch them on Saturday.
I mean, SEC conference play is just a whole different animal. I think we got to forgive the kid if it took him maybe a month or so to get used to the pace of play and the physicality and the bump and rub sort of way that they play ball in this conference. I'm wondering, guys, this might sound like a silly question, but over under on like 10. All right, if the number's 10, over under on how many essays we get from Auburn Twitter if Aiden Holloway actually does go out there and have a 20-plus point game on Saturday.
Hard over. Yeah.
They wouldn't even take that bet at a legitimate sports
it'd
book.
probably
Sorry.
It'd probably be close. I mean, you got to think how many Twitter pages are dedicated to to the Auburn Tigers in some form or another.
Entirely too many.
I imagine it's somewhere in the realm of like, just the number that I see on a regular basis is probably like 100, 150.
Yeah.
Each one of those will be posting an essay. And that's not even the accounts that I don't even see or the ones that I have blocked and have forgotten that I once upon a time saw them on my Twitter feed. Hammer that
the over on that one. All right,
yeah,
so I should have said it like 2025 probably.
Now if you said
who's going to have the biggest meltdown is the real question here. My money's on Kyle.
Yeah, let's go with him.
I have had Kyle blocked for I can't even tell you how long. It's just too much.
This is going to be a game that you sit there and we look back on. Who knows? Maybe 10 years down the line, and it's like, remember when Alabama and Auburn, number 1 and number 2? What is the state of the programs right now? We'd like to think in 10 years from now, Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl will still be at the helms of their respective schools. At some point, who knows? There's always the uncertainty of having a really, really great coach, especially in a world where the quote unquote blue blood programs of the world are consistently doing bad things, not living up to expectations. The NBA is always going to be calling a guy like Nate Oates with his style of play and how it's very NBA-esque. But
Auburn won't have to worry because Auburn is a blue blood program. So Bruce Pearl
that is correct. I once upon a time heard that. It would be crazy if Auburn hasn't beaten a blue blood program this year, but Alabama they beat UNC. My bad. But Alabama could have 2 blue blood wins this season if they end up getting this win.
Does UNC count right now? Right now,
technically yes, but Hubert Davis they got some work to do, to say the least. Actually, Alabama would have 3.
His buyout's under $1.5
Alabama would
million.
have 3. They beat Kentucky in Rupp Arena earlier this season. They'll get a chance to beat them in Coleman Coliseum.
And Kentucky still counts. Mark Pope is doing a hell of a job.
He's doing a fantastic job.
So,
I was told he sucked after they lost to Arkansas.
I was told that as well. John Calipari comes back to the building. Yeah. Emotions are kind of all over the place. The pressure was probably more on the Kentucky team than the Auburn team or than the Arkansas team to not lose that game. And, they end up losing it. But any other, the rest of the SEC, the way it's kind of laying out right now, obviously,
we did Alabama, a wellness check on South Carolina.
They're going through it, man. Have a chance to possibly get a win. They're home against an Oklahoma team that's hasn't really done exceptionally well in SEC play. But we're kind of seeing a separation of a couple of different tiers in this SEC right now. You've got the teams right there at the top, the Alabamas, Auburns. If you want to include Florida, they already have 3 conference losses. I wouldn't necessarily say they have as much of a chance to win the conference as Alabama or Auburn. Then there's that second group that has the Tennessees, Floridas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss. Then there's that tier right there in the upper echelon of that tier is like Mizzou, Kentucky, teams that are going to make the tournament, but we'll see how well they do. And then you've got the bottom feeders of the conference, which right now the only 2 teams that I can say are definitively out are LSU and South Carolina. I mean, even Arkansas at 3-7 in conference play still has a road to get in. I mean, they could accumulate enough quad 1 wins in the best back stretch of their season to punch their ticket. But I mean, what do we think? So they've floated anywhere from between 11 to possibly 14 teams from the SEC making this NCAA tournament. What do we think the numbers ultimately going to fall on, and who do you think is going to be left out of the NCAA tournament besides South Carolina and LSU from the SEC?
Well, we're at a point in the season where these things will out, and I think Texas is pretty clearly not a tournament team. This result yesterday, I mean, you look at their conference marks, pretty dim, the outlook. They kind of got back into the picture, which kind of there now, kind of not. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. I don't think they're going to end up being picked on Selection Sunday. I still don't know that Arkansas is. I just think it's too big of a hole to dig out of. So that's where we are. Oklahoma is a toss-up right now. Gun to my head right now, I'd probably say, first 4 caliber, 10 seed, possibly like they got in 2018 when they shouldn't have been in, but the Trae Young hype machine was real. Something along those lines, and Porter Moser's a good enough coach to make that sort of thing happen and make the adjustments down the stretch. But, the league by and large is obviously very good. I mean, Mississippi State struggles against top teams, but they're really good. You look at Florida, as good as they are, I don't know that anybody expected this out of them. Kentucky going through kind of bumpy road, but obviously good, obviously going to play in March and could play on the second weekend. Ole Miss, same kind of deal, even though they, until they faced Kentucky, they'd been like 1-5 against the top 25 or 1-6, with Alabama being the lone exception when they came out in less than neutral that game. So all this to say, so many variables to throw around. I think Missouri will make it a bounce back year for them. Great job by Dennis Gates, who, for the record, I never stopped believing in.
No, you didn't.
Things like that. Those are the teams. I think the ones that will be left out for sure is Arkansas, Texas, LSU, and South Carolina.
For reference, Joe Lunardi has 13 teams from the SEC in. His first team out is the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's got Oklahoma and Texas in. He updated those rankings yesterday. So that was before. Yeah, that was before the Alabama-Texas game. Texas was part of his, last 4 buys to avoid taking a trip to Dayton. Texas, as Will said, will probably be on the outside of the bubble looking in. They'll have some work to do. Their final 5 games, a theoretically easier stretch to close out conference play. They get a chance to play Kentucky in the Moody Center. They go to South Carolina, to Arkansas, get Georgia at home, to Mississippi State, and get Oklahoma at home to close out the season. That's pretty winnable. If I had to guess, Trey Johnson's really, really good. He'll be lottery pick type of guy. Had a really good night last night for Texas despite the loss. It's just a kind of the classic example of you've got a lottery pick freshman that is going to be able to win you a lot of games, but they aren't quite good enough to really do damage in the NCAA tournament. Well, I'd probably go with you. I think Texas is probably. I actually think Texas is probably going to make the NCAA tournament. I'm less willing to say that Oklahoma ends up getting there, just because of some of the losses they've taken, they've really struggled, probably more than Texas in conference play. And who knows, maybe that final regular season game of the season, ultimately ends up deciding which one of these guys.
That Texas A&M game hurts
Yeah.
them. They
Yeah,
won
they
that
would be
game, that 2-point
doing
game.
perfectly fine, but losing that game definitely stings. We have anything else?
11.
You
11.
think
Yeah, 11. There's going to be 11.
Who's missing? Who's missing?
I mean, South Carolina and LSU.
South Carolina, LSU, Texas, and Arkansas are out. Maybe I'm going out on a limb here. Oklahoma pulls it together and gets in. Georgia stumbles down the stretch. Georgia's not going.
That is also a very likely possibility.
I don't believe in Georgia. I don't trust Georgia.
Yeah. Yet another example of a really good college freshman going out there and leading his team to a lot of wins, but they might not necessarily. Georgia's 4-8. You have a very real case with that. Dogs next 3 games, they get Mizzou at home, then they go to Auburn, and then they get Florida at home. That's if they want a chance.
Difficult.
If they want to.
If they win 2 out of those 3, you might as well.
If they win 2 out of the 3, punch their ticket. They're locked into the NCAA tournament. If they win 1 out of 3, chances are still pretty solid.
They're probably off that last 4 byes just because of these teams are playing.
And then if you win just 1 out of 3, you likely need to win out the rest of your season. You're sitting there fighting for a bubble spot with Texas, who you would go to immediately after that Florida game. And then you're not doing yourself any favors with South Carolina. Vandy's a good team. They'll make the tournament.
Georgia wants that Arkansas game back. You look at and that's how it is with bubble teams, right, guys? I guess this will be my last soliloquy before I have to sign off. But every year with bubble teams, it's always, if not, and there's plenty of games you could pick from, but there's always that one game I think that sticks out like a sore thumb, and you look at it and you say, we should have had that. And that we would be in a different fortune.
Alabama football knows that
Georgia,
as of the last handful of seasons. We've learned that lesson the tough
way.
For
Georgia, it is Arkansas. For Oklahoma, it would be Texas A&M.
For Texas, Texas
Alabama
had a chance to
a lot of years
upset Auburn and Tennessee. Both of those were 5-point games or less. Man, I hate that. Hey, we can all celebrate that.
We can.
They did Rick Barnes dirty. And that's
that's a good thing.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was.
Boy, did it elevate the caliber of SEC basketball in such a seismic way that could not have even been pictured at that time.
Yeah, and has been living, causing nightmares for Alabama fans for years. The dreaded game to Thompson Bowling Arena in the better, I guess, a week and a half for this Alabama team. I'm not excited for it. I don't know if anybody else is. It's not a game that I'm, will be aesthetically pleasing basketball like this Alabama Auburn game on Saturday. Both of this Tennessee Alabama game was probably going to be okay. Tennessee's going to sit there and punch Alabama. Let's see if Alabama can just keep chucking up shots, and if enough go in, they'll win.
The officials have been trying to make up for the dude's elbow on who was it? Uros Placic all those years ago in the SEC tournament. Which granted that was pretty bad. That could have been
I almost have to wonder, if you're Alabama, do you just go ahead and you just you play the walk-ons, you play the guys that you're not really worried about, say to hell with it. We're not playing the rugby match this year. Beat us by 38. We don't give a shit. We're not taking an injury.
Max Charnowski, up your liability insurance, bud. I for one think Max Charnowski could hold.
I think he could do a really good job. He needs more playing time. He's one of those guys that should be out on the court. Maybe we'll get into some foul trouble at some point this season. He'll get his opportunity to shine, knock down a couple of big trays in a big Tide win. We would love to see that.
Hardy, you seen that kid? He shines everywhere he goes.
That is more than true. He lights up a room when he walks in. Is part of this Alabama program through and through.
He said he sells tickets to Bibb County.
Stop. That's wild. My goodness. One last little.
On that note, I have to sign off and go get my sister from her class because the university has not gotten rid of 5 p.m. classes as of yet. And somehow, because of all the crap going on, proverbially in our world today, no world leaders have picked up on the fact that 5 p.m. classes have got to be some sort
What's
of
up with the
treaty
weather
violation.
down there? All right, you go get your sister. Hardy, can you fill me in on this?
I mean, yeah, just really big time severe weather threat passing through a large part of the southeast. Of course.
Are you getting snow again, or is it finally
No.
season?
Like, it's like 75 degrees here right now.
Okay.
It went from being very, very, cold, snowing, record low temperatures to we just broke record highs. And when you have weather that is just as rapidly changing as that, weather patterns tend to do very strange things, causes high chances of severe weather, tornadoes. There was one touchdown in Pensacola on Monday.
Nice.
Ripped up a kind of a warehouse metal building. Not ideal, but really the big thick of the weather that should affect like Mobile proper should get here in like 2-3 hours, something like that. And we'll stick around till like 1 a.m. So it's going to be a lovely drive to work. And one last thing before we kind of close on the basketball stuff and get into what happened on Sunday. Alabama closes out the season with this 7-game, absolutely brutal conference schedule, all against ranked teams. Then following that, if Alabama we would hope that they do well during that stretch and they get into the SEC tournament as a top 4 team, they'd still have to play, at least 3 games in the SEC tournament to have a chance to win it, and then have to win 6 games in a row in the NCAA tournament to win the whole thing. Do you think there's some part of Nate Oates' mind that's like, because you have to, I mean, of course you think you can win every single game, but if he had to give up, the regular season title, the SEC tournament title, I'm not going to say give up on the national title, but if he had to pick one of those two, the SEC tournament or the regular season, which one would he rather lose? Which one would Alabama fans be more comfortable with him losing? Which one do you think people would take?
I think that early exit in the conference tournament last year. I don't know that it was the factor. I don't know how big of a factor it was, but as a matter of circumstance, the end result was pretty good. So that's the route that I would go, because it's not a matter of giving up on one of them. If you give up on the regular season title, you still have to play all those games.
Yeah.
All right. So make your pennant run for the regular season, and maybe you go ahead and take an early exit in the SEC tournament, because it's not like you're going to play a game for third place after that. You're gonna get some rest. And I think that's what the team needs heading into March. The last thing you want to do is hang another Sweet 16 banner because you took the conference outright in the greatest year of SEC basketball in history, but you were absolutely gassed.
Yeah,
that's
what we saw from the other 2 teams that ended up winning the SEC regular season and tournament titles, flamed out in the Sweet 16, the NCAA tournament. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of effort for a team that's been kind of banged up for a large part of this season. Darian Reed is still not at 100% yet. We don't know if he's going to play on Saturday. I'm sure they're going to try to give him a go, but we'll see on that. If you're gonna, I guess pass up, quote unquote, an opportunity, I'd have to agree with you on the SEC tournament title. I'd of course like to win a game, because winning, if you won the regular season and the SEC tournament, you would be the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah.
That grants you a lot of very, very good things. Alabama will get to play in that South Regional, won't have to travel as much, all of that good stuff. If you just compete and finish top 2 in the SEC regular season and have maybe win a game and then lose the second, losing the semifinals SEC tournament, you'll probably still be a 1 seed. Just with how this team has been, how it's really played out. So things, you want to set yourself up, set your team up for a lot of success. Of course, the NCAA tournament, super matchup dependent. I think this Alabama team, the way their offense is built, has the ability to take down pretty much anyone they face, as long as they're not playing a 100% rugby match, like we saw against an Ole Miss, or we saw with Tennessee, or like we usually see with Tennessee, or even like a mid-major team like a Grand Canyon, like we saw last year coming out and just shooting a ridiculous, both teams end up just shooting a ridiculous amount of fouls and could not get just into any rhythm whatsoever.
I think that game took like 3 weeks.
Yeah, it definitely felt like it. But my goodness.
I watched, I forget what the circumstances of that evening were for me, but I watched that game in 3 different structures, like a commercial building and 2 different domiciles.
Yeah, it was
I forget
unreal.
what the circumstances were, but 3 different addresses. I watched that game.
Yeah, it never seemed to end. But one thing that has ended is this NFL season. Football, as we generally know it, UFL starts in a couple of weeks. If it's interesting, if the Stallions are still rolling, might get into that a little bit. But
they're coming off a 3-peat, isn't that right?
They are coming off a 3-peat. 4 in a row would be kind of wild, but NFL season's over. Football season is over as we know it. Lots of developments. Shout outs to the Philadelphia Eagles for capturing Super Bowl 59 down there in the Big Easy, beating, preventing the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, all those guys from winning a 3-peat. Shout out to Tom Brady for having a 2-0 record against Patrick Mahomes whenever he is in the building in a Super Bowl venue. Just
there you go.
Very strange things to see from that. But I mean, Aiden, we watched the Super Bowl. It didn't take very long before we really didn't need to watch the Super Bowl.
No.
The Eagles pretty much jumped. I mean, they jumped on the Chiefs right out of the gate. Kansas City put up 16 fourth quarter points, absolute garbage time. Everyone was kind of sitting there waiting for Mahomes's, 28-3 moment. It did not come whatsoever.
No.
We at the beginning, before the season started, the Eagles traded Hassan Reddick, and a lot of people were like, "You're giving up one of the best pass rushers in the league." If you have a young guy that is more than capable of stepping into that role and is a way cheaper option, Eagles just proved that that type of thing can go win you Super Bowls. Now, if you have a guy like Trey Hendrickson on your team and the guy that's backing him up is not nearly the quality of player, go ahead and pay Trey Hendrickson. Don't let him walk to the Cincinnati Bengals. Just want to throw that one out there. But Eagles looked fantastic. Chiefs really sold out on not letting Saquon Barkley get going. Had one of his worst games all season from a rushing standpoint. 25 carries, 57 yards.
If you look at the box score and the box score only, sure.
Well, no, he didn't look. No, that was the one thing that I watched the game and I was like, the Chiefs are making sure that Saquon does not, because usually, like a lot of teams will sit there and do this, and I did this against Saquon all season, but eventually he will break that one long run.
Right.
Chiefs did not allow that to happen. Jalen Hurts had a very, very good rushing day. Was able to scramble, pick up some big runs, ran a touchdown in. Really impressive game from him. Eagles said, we want Jalen Hurts to beat us, and Jalen was able to do it. It's one of those things where if you've got all of the pieces set up and you've got a defense that is preventing Patrick Mahomes.
Suffocate.
It reminded me of the Chiefs Bucks Super Bowls from a few years ago, where the Chiefs Mahomes was just running around, could not do anything, and the Bucks were just rushing 4 players the whole game. Eagles did that even more so. Rushed 4 guys, dropped everyone back in coverage. Had a Cooper DeJean touchdown during Black History Month. With
Disrespectful.
I mean, absolutely
Just
egregious.
uncourteous.
Could not believe that happened. Right before the Kendrick Lamar halftime show too. Just really disgraceful
maniacal
things from Cooper DeJean, who is someone let the Eagles get essentially 2 first-round draft pick corners, and Quinyon Mitchell is like your standard, just like, I'm going to go out there, lock you down. You're not going to hear from me all game. Cooper DeJean is like, yeah, I'm going to go out there, make plays, do a bunch of crazy things. And,
sorry,
a lot of teams tried to get one of those guys on their respective roster. The Eagles happened to get both of them in one draft class.
Thank you, Adam Peters. Adam, I trust, but that was Adam Peters.
Yeah.
Doing.
The Eagles are set up right now with everything they have to be really successful for multiple years.
Oh yeah, that's a young roster.
Lots of really young, talented players. The people that they needed to pay have already been paid. Devontae Smith got an extension. Jalen Hurts got an extension. AJ Brown,
AJ Brown still got a couple years on his deal.
Yeah, he's still got more years on his contract. Lane Johnson. This isn't Madden. He's not going to retire out of the blue from one season. He will likely be back. The rest of that offensive line is still fairly young. They've done really, really good things. If they have one thing to address in the draft, I don't know what it would be. More O-line depth, more linebacker depth.
Probably O-line depth. You've still got some veterans on that offensive line that, like Lane Johnson, guys that have been there with Kelsey and, for the decade or so that the Philadelphia's had a really strong offensive line. They're getting old. So are their knees, so are their ankles, so are their shoulders, So you want to start bringing some guys in to learn and grow with the veterans on this team before they go ahead and bow out from competitive football. But Hardy, I can think of one place where they actually do have the luxury of burning the draft pick if they so choose. If they like somebody, they could use a kicker.
Yeah.
Jake Elliott kind of sucked outside of 50 this year and happened to have a good Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But you're not going to spend a first-round pick on a kicker.
You're not. But if anybody could.
If anybody could in the league, that yes, the Philadelphia Eagles could afford to do something like that. But they could probably get the number 1 kicker off the board in like the 5th round.
The 5th round, yeah.
Something like that. They're really good.
1 to 53, it's the best roster in the NFL, and there really isn't a close second.
The
fact that Mike McDaniel let his players,
I said the Lions are probably number 2, but the Lions had, tons of injuries this season. We'll see if that affects them going forward. 49ers still, for the most part, have a great roster. Injury concerns.
Again, injuries, yeah.
But there's Eagles, I agree with your point 100%.
And then you couple that with the fact that Mike McDaniel let his players gaslight him into firing Vic Fangio for just coaching them too hard. And so then he goes up there and, with the best defensive roster in the NFL again. And Howie Roseman's the GM. This is the problem for me as a Skins fan, is like, we've got this window with Jaden Daniels here, and the team in the NFC that's going to be the thorn in our side is in our goddamn division. And it is such a complete operation. Jeffrey Lurie's a good owner. All right. Similar to Josh Harris. He's willing to spend money. All right. He just wants his team to win, and he'll spend money on it. All right. You've got an excellent general manager. You have a coach that
rubs
Look,
people the wrong way, but is clearly good at his job.
Exactly. Feel the way you feel about the guy. He's
Yeah,
winning
but
football games.
Yeah, he is a football coach. He's been to two Super Bowls in his first 3 years of coaching the Philadelphia Eagles. When he
Right.
got the job, everyone laughed at him and was like, "Who is this guy? Why did they hire this guy?" He's been really, really good. To the Vic Fangio point, this guy has been a legendary defensive coach dating back to when he coached the Dome Patrol in New Orleans, the best linebacking core of all time. He's been around the national. He knows defense. He is the person that has pretty much created this era of the National Football League that we live in now, where everyone plays two high safeties and you just play everything in front of you. That's a lot of that is him, implementing that in Denver because of what Patrick Mahomes did. The first couple of years that Mahomes was in Kansas City, that's where we sit at right now. Mahomes, he was looking all night to take that deep shot down the field. Got the late one,
Never took
of course, to Xavier Worthy in absolute garbage time when
with second stringers on the field.
Yeah, I mean, when the Eagles were just trying to get guys like Kenny Pickett a little playing time in the Super Bowl. Speaking of Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett, shout out to him. You can't allow when a defensive coordinator of that level, and the way that a lot of these teams should be built is like great offensive minded head coach and then just like as good of a DC as you can possibly get. I think that's kind of the formula right now. If you let a guy with the experience and the aptitude for calling defenses, as good as Vic Fangio, get his hands on a group as talented as what the Philadelphia Eagles have, not just in one position group like the Dome Patrol, but across all three levels of that defense, you're screwed. And teams beat them this season. It's not like they were perfect 100% of the time.
I mean they started 2-2.
Yeah.
But they made the adjustments they made the bye week, and then after that, the only team that could touch them was Jade Daniels.
Yeah, and that was a crazy game, but
ludicrous.
But but this team, struggled to start out the gates. Lost a weird game to Atlanta. Ended up, playing the Saints in the Superdome in a super awful, gross game that no one wanted to watch. And then finally Saquon Barkley just broke a long touchdown run and it was like, all right, wrap it up. It's time to go home.
Yep.
That Saquon run single-handedly ended the Saints' dream of a Super Bowl. After that historic first 2 game start.
We've never seen a 2-0 start like that one.
You'll never see one again. It won't get any better than that.
Bitchin'.
But this Eagles team is primed to try to repeat. They had the motivation of, hey, we're going to go back and get our revenge for losing 2 years ago. That was the real big driving factor for this year's Super Bowl. Being a repeat back-to-back Super Bowl champ is something that is very, very difficult to do. Very, very few teams have ever done it. There's always going to be a team you think that will be hungrier than you. If you're the champion, which team that's going to be next season, who knows? It might be after. There's the Commanders outperformed expectations, probably relative to what we expected this the first year. The Packers, kind of flamed out. The Lions injury stuff, and that's just the NFC. You still have the ravenous crews of the Bengals, the Bills, the Baltimore Ravens with some guys that are going to be Hall of Fame quarterbacks someday. Leading the helm right there. Any of those guys are trying to beat Mahomes on the other side. Right now you have 2 borderline juggernauts at the top of their respective conferences. It's going to be super fun to see which one of these teams next season is able to make enough moves, flesh out their roster enough, and stay healthy enough to
Yeah.
to really make a deep run in the postseason, possibly win a Super Bowl.
I have a hard time seeing how you can't sort of expect to see the Eagles back in this position, because there were zero things about this run and the way they played this season that were remotely fluky. It was consistent dominance. It was consistent, not just out coaching the guys on the other sideline, but also across the board. Not a single team in the league could win one-on-one matchups with them. And I don't see that necessarily changing in one off season. I could be wrong. Again, injuries can be a factor. Nick Sirianni could, do some Nick Sirianni things, and he and Jalen Hurts can be doing this again next year like they were the previous season before this one. If there's an Achilles heel there, it's the fact that the quarterback and the head coach are diametrically opposite personalities. That's it.
Yeah,
I think that's the only flaw on the team, but they're making it work right now. They just won a Super Bowl. Look, they're bringing the silver trophy around to the late night shows. All right, so
Yep.
I can't really harp on that point too much. No, I don't see anybody from the NFC coming up and taking this crown from them in 1 year. I mean, with them fully healthy, and their defense firing on all cylinders, they've hung 55 points on my team. With I mean, Baltimore clearly has
issues. They have
it's gotta be a coaching thing. And I hate to say that about John Harbaugh.
Zay Flowers, number one wide receiver for that team, made the Pro Bowl this season. I think he's kind of set up to be more of a
probably wide
Devontae
receiver
Smith
too.
type of guy, where
Yep.
you need a really true number one alpha type of receiver next to him. That might be
I don't disagree.
That might be something the Ravens address this draft or this offseason. Might go try to get someone like T. Higgins. Who knows if that really even works? But that's kind of, just an idea for them.
But I don't trust Baltimore at this point.
Yeah,
no.
Like,
I don't trust them to think that they can.
I don't trust the Bills. I don't trust Baltimore.
No.
There's
I don't trust the Bengals for damn sure.
Yeah, Bengals defense atrocious. The Steelers might never score more than like 23 points a game again.
No. And everybody knows it's the same defense it's been for the last 18 years.
The Texans are super interesting. There's definitely something growing there. If CJ Stroud can continue to develop, maybe we'll see them one day. Broncos, they've got some stuff, and I'm just going through some of the playoff teams right now. But the NFC, I think there's, it's more total team relevance. The AFC, I would, argue you have probably 7 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Well, who's your top 10?
In no particular order, because I don't want to get into that. Probably Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jalen. Maybe go ahead and put Jaden Daniels in that top 10 right now.
Brother, he's top 5, but all right.
I said no particular order.
I know.
Who have I already said? You could probably throw Herbert in there. He's probably closer to 10 than he is to anywhere close to 5. I might have already said Josh Allen, Burrow.
You did.
Matthew Stafford's probably right at 10.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I can't really. I like Jared Goff. Jared Goff isn't a world-beating quarterback. I don't really care for Jordan Love too much, but like I was saying, I mean, most of the
and you brought up the Packers with the way you said they kind of fell apart towards the end of the year. I think they regressed back to what they actually are towards the end of the season.
That's fair. They looked really good to start this year, and it's one of those things where you're like, okay, well, maybe they'll be able to make some noise. They've made it probably too far. Their first year with Jordan Love really taking over the helm. Made it to the conference championship game, ultimately flamed out against San Francisco 49ers. But we'll see if that's all they can get to, or if they can, reach another level, reach another gear. Just looking through, the rest of the NFL. That's probably the top 10, in no particular order.
Jalen, Jaden,
Stafford,
Mahomes, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, Baker.
putting Baker in a top 10 list is interesting.
I'm dead ass too.
I don't hate the pick. He's probably like 11 or 12 for me. But
Okay. Goff.
Yeah, I probably have Jared Goff like right ahead of him at like 11.
Purdy. Maybe not Purdy.
He's good. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, he's damn good, but he might not be top 10.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing somebody obvious. I don't know that I want to put Stafford in there.
I know you're not a big fan of Justin Herbert, but like
certified hater.
The talent
certified
is there.
hater. No, it isn't.
It's
simply
there.
not. He's just tall.
The talent is there. He's but he falls lower on the rung every season. But really think about it. Like Matthew Stafford, like how many people were really like putting him like that level until he won a Super Bowl? He was always super talented, always had rocket arm, this type of stuff. But it wasn't until he won the Super Bowl that people like really started going like, hey, this guy's probably one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League.
I think he might have
Derek
taken
Carr
too much heat.
is like up there. I heard the Saints are, either going to try to trade or cut him. I'm listening to calls. We will take a 7th round pick for him. We will pay 75% of his salary. Just get him off the roster. If they do cut him,
do you know who your like 3rd biggest cap hit is next year?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah. Taysom is 4. No. We've got.
Can the franchise?
We've
file
got 2
bankruptcy?
minutes. We've got 2 minutes.
Can the franchise file bankruptcy? Can you file a Chapter 13?
No, they can't. They could try. I don't think they'll be granted that luxury, and I don't want any bank whatsoever to gain any type of control of the New Orleans Saints. As we've found out in some recent weeks, the Catholic Church has already dipped their hands a little bit too much into that. But that is a story for another time. If you want to read about it, go look it up.
That's a good one. Front office brings it.
Yeah. So we got 2 minutes. New Orleans Saints, last team in this coaching cycle to hire their head coach. They get the Eagles offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, one of the youngest coaches in the league. He's 36 years old.
It's a good hire.
I think is really good hire. Obviously, when you look at the coaching, carousel, and you're like, oh, we need, you try to get some guy like a Ben Johnson, someone, from a team that exceeded expectations or like looked like visually great all season. The Eagles, while, not necessarily, is the flashiest thing that we've seen from a team, offensive team this season, found ways to get it done. He brings, and it's finally a changing of the guard in New Orleans after the Sean Payton era. Dennis Allen was just a holdover from that. Should he have ever gotten the job? Who knows? He's now the defensive coordinator in Chicago, where I think he's going to be really good because he's good as a defensive coordinator. He has shown to be that throughout his entire career. He just cannot be a head coach. Brandon Staley, another example of that, is expected to become the Saints DC. So hopefully Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley, they're going to get time. It doesn't matter how bad.
You have to assume that because if you're Kellen Moore, you don't take that job unless you're offered some amount of guarantee and some collateral for it, that you're going to be there at least for a couple years after all this cap comes off the books.
Yeah. The Saints cap situation, the age on this roster, it's, I guess, like the 2026 or maybe so it's 2025 now. I think it's the 2027 offseason is when you finally are all out of the Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, the Derek Carr deal, if you want to keep him around for that long and don't just cut him after June 2nd and save $30 million in cap space. Whatever you want to do with that, Mickey Loomis. Kellen Moore's going to get the opportunity to slash and burn a lot of this roster over the next, however, like 2-3 seasons. If the Saints and Saints faithful start calling for him to be fired or whatever after like year 1 or year 2 because he goes 10-15 next season, I'm going to file as many complaints as I possibly can because that would be ridiculous. Taysom Hill coming off an ACL injury. Sorry, Taysom. Love you. Bye. Cam Jordan, a million years old. Can't move anymore.
They trotted him out for his audition for a TV role at the Super Bowl. Okay, they're trying to get this man a job so that they can save some face there.
Yeah, Ryan Ramczyk has retired. Tyrann Mathieu, when his deal's over, please God don't re-sign him. I love him. He's been a great player for a number of years in the NFL. He's from New Orleans, loves the city. He doesn't need to be playing football anymore.
No.
I already said Demario Davis. He's arguably the best player on the entire roster. He's still doing his thing. He can't cover in space. His best attribute for a number of years was always being able to blitz, be one of the best blitzing linebackers in the NFL. Don't re-sign Chase Young. Roll out the cheapest, youngest roster.
You might be able to get Chase Young for like $2.5 million. You might want to reconsider that.
Who knows? If we can do that, then sure, bring him back. Whatever.
Yeah.
But
he'll take a pub sub account.
Yeah, but if he's asking for more than he's probably worth, don't bother. For the next 2 seasons, Kellen Moore, Saints faithful, allow Kellen Moore to roll out the youngest, worst roster in the NFL. Get a top 3 pick the next couple of seasons. Draft some difference makers for this team because you need them. Don't do stupid things. And
don't trade up, trade back.
Yeah, you this whole roster needs reconstruction. We were talking about the Eagles roster, top to bottom, 153, best in the NFL. Saints, top to bottom, 153, probably the worst. There's not
I don't have an argument. No, yeah.
There's a couple of guys that you can absolutely keep, possibly sign an extension. We'll see if Chris Olave can still, think properly after hospital passes that he's caught. We love Taliesin Fuaga. He's awesome left tackle. Going to be, hopefully he hangs around for the next 10, 15 years. That would be awesome. That would solve a lot of issues. Trevor Penning got better this past season. Don't know if he's the long-term spot at right tackle.
But he's on your roster and he doesn't have an obscene cap hit.
But he's there, and I think we can get him for a pretty good price, and he got a lot better last year. You still have, Paulson Adebo just broke his leg. Sign him for as cheap as you could possibly get. You still have Kool-Aid, Alontae Taylor, Jordan Howden on the back end. Just like I said, flesh out, drop everybody that has a 3 at the front of their age, and fill it up with the youngest team that you possibly can.
The inverse of George Allen's over the hill gang.
Yeah,
is what you need.
If you can do that, and who knows if whenever all of these big time old contracts are away, you'll have a ton in cap space. If you want to make a move on a guy that's like 27 years old and is like one of the better players in the NFL, and for whatever reason he wants to come play in New Orleans for a rebuilding team, sure, go do it to sell tickets.
Sure.
But, there's a lot of other things this team needs to figure out before it's all said and done. But that's the end of my rant. Congratulations to the New Orleans Saints. Great venue for the Super Bowl this year. Everyone that down there in New Orleans looked like they had an awesome time. Congrats to the Saints for winning the Super Bowl, even after not playing it, because they got one of the best coaches in this carousel, the guy that just won a Super Bowl. Hopefully he can bring one to the Big Easy. And congratulations.
Shout out John Baptiste for probably the only creative interpretation of the national anthem that I've ever actually enjoyed.
I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that was excellent. Shout out Kendrick Lamar. I thought the halftime show was excellent.
Thought it was good.
Shout out Nick Wright of ESPN or Fox Sports rather, for being a damn good sport.
For taking it on the chin.
Right on the chin. For being a damn good sport about it all. And on that terrible disappointment.
If you talk the most, you got to be able to take the most.
Yeah, you got to be able to. That is a lost concept in today's